Hello, it's Drisk here and welcome to the best game of a letter, Arcade Edition, with this video being the letter B. Yes, I thought in this crazy world where we're drowning in choice, it'd be fun if I asked myself that simple question. What if I could only choose 5 games per letter per system and nothing else? Then what would I choose? I've then ranked those games in order of my own personal preference. Now remember, this isn't what games is most important to video game history, or those games that I know are widely loved across the board, but simply which games are the most fun for me personally to play. My hope is that it may highlight or remind you of some great games, so the next time you're looking at your fully loaded gaming lists, it might encourage you to single out and try some of these gems again. Okay, as I say, this is for the letter B on the arcade platform, and again it was a really tough choice to decide my top 5, but I have chosen and I'm happy with my choices, so here we go. Okay, game 5, and I've chosen the great vector blaster called Black Widow, released by Atari in February of 1983, not as 1982 it says on the arcade board. This game is a twin-stick shooter in the vein of Robotron, and has you play a spider on a web who must shoot the variety of bugs and beasties for points. The vibrant colour vectors really impress here, as does the lightning-quick gameplay as you scoot around the screen defending your web home. Yes, this title is amazing fun, with added elements such as a hornet who, when shot, turns into a grub egg, and therefore you must push them off the web for additional points. If you're too slow, they'll hatch and you have to deal with another angrier hornet. There's also the thunderbug who, when shot, will fly directly at your spider and you must shoot them quickly to take them out. In summary, this game is fast, it's furious and fun, and I always make a web line to it every time I take a trip to the arcade club in Bury, who incidentally actually have this rare machine fully playable. But in between those lucky pilgrimages there, thankfully this game appears on many Atari collections over the years. Most recently is the Atari Flashback Volume 1 on the Xbox One and PS4 consoles. It's also on the Atari Vault collection on the PC, but it's been on historic collections as well, such as the Atari Anthology and like-minded ones that were on the original Xbox, PS1 and PS2 era of gaming. The version we're seeing here, incidentally, is the great MAME rendition, which, as you can see, does a great job of capturing the look and feel of the vector. Okay, let's go on to number 4, and for this I chose Battlegrega, released in 1996 by 18 and Raising, former Toplin staff, and behind such classics as Armed Police Batrider. This game is a great vertical shooter, clearly taking inspiration from Taito's 1990 game Gun Frontier, but putting the faster pace of shooting on their previous games at Toplin, such as Batugen, this making it even more frantic. Now, I adore this game, and it's clear that this was a seasoned team of veterans that clearly knew what they were doing at this point, making pure gaming perfection as you take on wave after wave of enemies. This is a real score junkie's dream as well, with many hidden medals and the destructible scenery for extra points, so this will really have you hooked. Now thankfully, alongside the rather expensive Sega Saturn port, this has now found its way onto the Xbox One and PS4 consoles as a digital download, so there's no excuse not to give this game a go. But as you can see, MAME also does a fantastic job in capturing how well it plays as well. So there's really no excuse not to track this down, and while you're at it, play the sequel, Battlegrega. Okay, for number 3 I've gone for another vertical shooter. I really do seem to love them at the moment. This is really rather special, and it's called Batugen, and released in 1993. Sadly, it was Toplin's last game before filing for bankruptcy, and it's a crying shame as well, because not only is this an amazing fun blaster, being perhaps their best, but an important one as well, because this was the world's first bullet hell shooter. They really took the shooter genre forward with this game. Now, Batugen means roughly by far the best brigade if you're doing a literal translation, and here you defend against a global takeover on a Earth-like planet and must take out the hordes of alien scum and villainy. Now, the game allows you to choose up to 6 ships here, each with their own unique firing patterns and levelling up path. Overall, I adore this game. It's fun, it's fast, and it's as addictive as hell, keeping me always coming back for more. Now, incidentally, many of the great developers who worked on this game went on to found Cave to continue the bullet hell genre. One individual probably needs no introduction, Tsuneki Ikeda, and he would go on to do many of my favourite shooters of all time at Cave, such as Dudonpachi, ESP Garuda, Death Smiles, Ketsu, and Mishima Sama series, to name but a few. Now, sadly, this game has only ever seen a port on the Sega Saturn, and unsurprisingly, it's rather expensive today to buy. And thankfully, this is always another one that's always on display in Arcade Club in Bury, so give this gaming classic a go today. Okay, my choice for number 2. And, well, it had to be Buggy Boy, or Speed Buggy as it's known in the US. This 1985 arcade racing classic by Tatsumi thankfully has a multitude of great home ports released back in the day. And for many, myself included, that was how I first came across this arcade title. But back in the day, I was lucky enough to stumble across the sit-down 3-screen extravaganza, and it really was a sight to behold, giving the player a wonderful widescreen experience. Now, in the game, you control a huge buggy and you have to collect flags in order to run through the gates to up your score. There's also time gates that must be run through, which are essential if you're going to survive in the next checkpoint. The game is all set to a strict time limit, like Outrun, offering you even more challenges on each stage you encounter. Now, although there are other buggies on the track, this is really all about you versus the track, dodging the obstacles and using logs to jump over difficult parts of the track, or slanted rocks to go on 2 wheels to handle tighter sections of the course, or finding a football hidden or otherwise to boot off into the sunset for additional bonus points. Overall, I adore this game. It's so addictive, and you know there's always a better time out there that you could achieve, as you know that there's the perfect run is just out of reach. The game has a generous 5 race locations that can be selected at the beginning. There's off-road, which is the easiest track, the frozen north track, which has ice and pine trees to contend with, the east track, which makes you feel like you're in Egypt, replete with side of pyramids you can actually ride up. There's a Mediterranean style west track that makes you feel like you're in France, Paris. And finally, the south track that makes you feel like you're in the Riviera and somewhere like Monte Carlo. Now, each area offers something entirely new, such as those slanted ramps or having to deal with long bridges with water on either side. And so each section always makes you have a real sense of achievement and progression as you tackle each one. Now, in the following year, in 1986, they released a cheaper version of that arcade game called Buggy Boy Jr. Now, this was a single screen stand-up version of the cabinet, but it's still just as playable. Unfortunately, the arcade version of this game has never actually made it to any arcade game compilations, but as you can see, MAME does a pretty good job, although I have to say the control settings I can never get just quite right as the arcade original. Thankfully though, this is another one that Arcade Club in Bury does actually have to play, and I always make a beeline for it, absolutely adoring it. Hopefully though, one day the Arcade Club will get a 3-screen sit-down version of it so I can try that again. A boy can dream. Okay, now we come to my number 1 game, and yes, it had to be Bubble Bobble, released in 1986 by Taito. Now, I've simply fallen in love with this game, with it being an almost a perfect arcade game. Playing either Bubble Bob, you are 2 boys who are out to save their girls, who's been kidnapped by Big Drunk the Magician, who's bizarrely turned you into lethal bubble-blowing dinosaurs. Now, it's a bit of a strange choice why he's turned you into bubble-blowing dinosaurs, but I guess he wants to give you a chance. But what we have here is 100 levels of single screen delight as you capture all the enemies with your toxic bubbles and pop them for goodies. Take out all the enemies and you move on to the next screen, all set to the amazingly addictive music of Tadashi Kimijima, he of Arkanoid fame. Now what's amazing about the game is its sheer complexity, especially if trying to get better scores. Burst several enemies at once and you get a bonus. Finish your final score with 2 equal digits, then ending in a 5 or a 0 to bring down large fruit. Do lots of jumping and moving around to get special power-ups, such as the yellow suite for rapid firing with bubbles, the blue suite for fast moving bubbles, the red shoes for moving faster. Get all 3 of those together and you're quite a formidable dino. Now what I love about the game is every level's really a puzzle that you must learn. Learning where to stand, how to move, to collect the power-ups are all essential to get as many points as possible before progressing. There's so many nuances to it all, such as skillful tricks like using the bubble to reach higher locations or bouncing quickly from one section to another. Great elemental bubbles such as water, lightning, fire to use to attack the enemies with. Letters which when they spell out the word extend take you off to an extend level which gives you an extra life. Of course, it works equally well as a 2-player game, helping each other out to finally make it to the end of the game and see that real ending, which I'm not going to spoil here. All in all, the game is sublime and I can never tire of it, with Fukio Mitsuji, the man behind Rainbow Islands, Sagaya, Darius 2, and the little known Game Gear exclusive puzzle game called Magical Puzzle Popils. And it needs to be played by more. So there you go. There's my top 5 for the arcade, beginning with the letter B. I'd love to hear your top 5, so please let me know in the comments. Now for me, I realise I've left a huge amount of heavy hitters off my list, and some really big golden era names as well. So I just want to go through some of those titles that I love but didn't quite make that top 5. There's Berserk, of course. Now I do love this game. I love the robot taunts and find it a fun game to play, but I do find the fact that you can run off the screen at any point and there seems no particular directional purpose to what you're doing means that I get a little bit lost on it. Then you have Battlezone. Now this is another classic and I really enjoy playing this as well, but I find I soon tire of it. Once you shot a few tanks, there's really not a lot more to it, and therefore I move to other things. Then of course there's Black Tiger, or Black Dragon as it's also known. Now this Capcom gem I really enjoy, and I'll be honest, for the longest time it was on my top 5 list. Then we have Bionic Commando. Now this I know is fondly loved by many, and I really like the idea of the game with the extendable arm to reach higher levels, and I adore the music, but I've always found it a little bit fiddly to play if I'm totally honest. Now Bomb Jack is another bona fide classic which I do really enjoy, but I'll be honest, I never quite got round to playing this that much on the Spectrum for some reason, and later on the Amiga it felt like it was a little bit old hat. So I suppose I've never really had the nostalgia for the game that other people have. Of course there's also Burger Time, another one I love, and I'll be honest, it's only really my lack of skills at playing it that meant it failed to make my list, because I get frustrated with it. Other fondly loved games such as Bad News vs Dragon Ninja is one I personally find is fine. I don't have quite the same love as other people do, but I understand why people may be drawn towards it. The same is true with Sega's Bonanza Brothers. Now I love the graphic style and I love the thieving premise, but after the few levels I find it doesn't really offer anything new and I get bored, quite frankly. Now alongside those heavy hitters there's some hidden gems scattered between the letter B as well that well worth giving a try. Battlegrega, which is the sequel to Battlegrega, is definitely worth your time, being a shooter seldom talked about and a lot of fun. There's also Bubbles by Midway. This is a really weird, unique premise of riding a bubble across a sink, taking out all the bugs and growing in size to clear out all the enemies. Another one is Big Karnak that most people would never have heard of, but it's a great fun title as you rescue your girl and take on the might of the Egyptian gods. Not to mention playing baseball with those naughty monkeys throwing coconuts at you. Yes, overall it was a tough choice to whittle this list down, especially when there's that kind of quality, but all in all I'm happy with the 5 that I've chosen. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video and it gives you the impetus to try some of these titles yourself. again. So please let me know what top 5 arcade games you would choose for the letter B, as I would love to know and perhaps try some of them. Okay, look out for my next video on the letter C, and I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, reach out to me on the comments, and also come and listen to me on the free podcast I'm also on called the Retro Gaming Discussion Show, where me and like-minded hosts chat all about retro gaming, and it's a lot of fun. So until next time, keep it retro.